Huntress draws her crossbow to strike back at crime. Here's your look at the new DC Collectibles. This is the DC Covergirls Huntress statue by Joelle Jones. Inspired by the powerful women of the DC Universe, DC Covergirls is a long-running line that features dynamic depictions of the most famous superheroes and supervillains in premium 9-inch statues, all based on art from some of the top talent in the comics industry. Helena Bartonelli, aka the Huntress, joins the DC Covergirls line as designed by Eisner-nominated artist and writer Joelle Jones. Armed with her crossbow and readied for anything that comes her way, this poly-resin piece features the Huntress in her Rebirth-era suit. Limited to only 5,000 pieces, this suit is certainly not one to be missed. We're going to start this review by measuring off to the very top of Huntress's hood. And that seems to be the highest point on the statue and a best place to really stop the tape measure. According to the readout, though, you're looking at the statue of Huntress standing 9.5 inches in height. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. I know you're curious as to how that's going to translate to centimeters. Feast your eyes on 24.1, just a little over 24 centimeters tall. I would like to also send out a big thank you to the folks over at DC Collectibles who were very nice enough to send this statue my way. Normally there would be like a little certificate of authenticity indicating what numbered sequence this statue would be. So in order for us to find out, what I will do is very carefully, because I don't want to bang that crossbow, flip the statue upside down. Not only to tell you that the statue is very limited to only 5,000 pieces, but this is an artist proof number 4. You also have some 4 felt feet on the placed out corners, or what corners there could be on a circle, at least spaced out from one another, so it will prevent some scratching if you, well, prevent the scratching at least when you put the statue on display. The base itself is the same style of base as the other Joelle Jones pieces. The same familiar circular black base outlined inside by the trim of the same signature, and it usually tends to be the same color of the character. For like the case of the Joelle Jones Harley Quinn, this would have been done in red. The outline in red and the circle in red, and the signature of Joelle also done in red. Huntress, with being primarily more a purple-clad character, then the outline here is also done in purple, with the signature done in purple, and even the trim in the midsection, about halfway up through the circle, is also outlined, done in purple as well. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's recessed. It's not simply just painted in place. They've actually, there's like a little indentation groove that runs around the full, I guess, perimeter of the circle, and it's been also painted here in purple as well. Now, this would be the Rebirth era costume for Huntress, so things change a little bit. More so to the mask. I guess the rest of the costume also changes as well, but like the real notable feature for what I always thought Huntress was, with the peaked, almost style Wolverine mask, is now gone in favor of just a hooded, almost like a hooded cloak that she wears. It's an interesting take, but a take I actually well receive. I really do like the new design of Huntress quite a bit. It gives you a chance also to see a little bit more of her face. Now she's kind of given more of a similar mask to something like Nightwing or Robin. The mask itself is done in purple to match the coloring of her lips. Even though the coloring of her lips is slightly a darker shade of the purple, I do like that it uses, at least the whole statue, what purple it does use, it seems to mix them up a little bit so they're not all the same purple across the board. The face is really quite pretty. I like that quite a bit. And even though she is wearing a hood that you can see covers off the majority of her head, I like the way that they've sculpted it in the sense that you still have hairs that peek their way out, escaping out from the opening of the hood. It's really a nice touch, especially when you see the ones that drape across her shoulders. I'm a big fan of this section right here. I don't know why I like this area so much, but I like how the curls of the hair wrap their way around, almost like vines wrapping out to the side of the tree. You can see how they just kind of carry their way out beyond the scope and beyond the confinement of the hood that she's got around her head here. Overall, it's, again, a really, really pretty head sculpt, and I really like that what they've done here for this release of Huntress in a statue. I mean, from the standpoint of paint, there's really not a lot that they've added to this face. It's actually a nice contrast, really, when you look at the rest of the costume. The costume has a lot of additional shading and highlights to it, whereas the face has been kept very minimal. And I think this is successful. The face itself doesn't really have any additional shading to it. There's no highlights or lowlights to it. There's no even shading underneath the neck. Their hair doesn't have some additional blue highlights to it, which I think would pull away from the face. In fact, the only shading that is anywhere on the face itself is the areas around the eyes. It's slightly a darker shade of purple than the lighter shade of purple that makes up the majority of the mask's color. In fact, the only additional coloring that this entire statue has is the sections of the hood, the long-tailed jacket that she wears, and the sections of her pants. The arms don't have additional shading or additional extra colors, nor does the gauntlets, nor does the crossbow, or even like her boots. Everything's kind of kept to one single pastel. And it really does soften the approach of this statue. It really doesn't need a whole lot of stuff weighing it down. Additional coloring is fine and good when it's necessary. And sometimes statues do feel the need to add so much excessive amounts of additional paint. Highlights and lowlights play such a pivotal role that at the end of the day it does take a lot away from a statue, especially a female form, which you really do want to keep it simple and really beautiful. I feel like adding so much extra stuff to it would take it away, and I'm really actually glad that they pulled back as much as they did when it came to the paint here on Huntress. Yeah, really some smart decision making when it came to what paint and what areas they wanted to shade. So the front of the torso here, for example, you've got the white coloring that's been added with additional airbrushing of gray. The corners, or the armpit areas, I guess, of the shirt does get some additional darker shades of purple or even borderlining black. We spin the figure statue around, and even like you can see how much additional work and care they've added to the top of the hood, completely again omitted from the front of the face. So as you move further down and looking at the tailed sections of her jacket, again, this is really where a lot of the color, or at least the additional shading, comes into play. It's really a nice contrast. It's not something I really remember too often with a lot of these statue pieces. Usually, like, shading and contrast of colors is consistent across the board. Here it's something quite very different, and I really like this approach quite a bit. Huntress is carrying around her crossbow, which I unfortunately have to admit is the one staggering point I have to mention about this particular statue. Everything else is handled so well, and if you unfortunately look at the one arrow that's sticking out from the end of the crossbow, you can see it's warped. I have considered the idea of trying to heat this up and bend this back into place. Even if you could just take a little bit of glue or something and put right underneath the arrow, it might be enough to keep it up. Now, this may not be across the board, but I do want to stress this in case somebody sees it for themselves and wonders why I didn't point out the fact that the arrow does have a bit of a droop to it. Again, it may only very well be mine. It may not be the one that you pick up for yourself. But it's unfortunate that the arrow does droop the way that it does. I can't even play around with this too much for the risk that I could break this off. The plastic is, of course, so thin, or the polyresin is so thin that they've used for this. Then again, you're just asking for trouble by trying to warp this back into place. You can't even simply heat this and re-manipulate it, because I think you really ultimately would do damage to the bow itself. The crossbow, excluding for the fact that the arrow does have a bit of a droop to it, is very nicely sculpted. And again, not a whole lot of paint has been really added here whatsoever. They've added a little bit of line on both sides of the crossbow, And this looks like it's been done with wiring as opposed to the poly resin. It's a nice change of mediums, so using that instead of the poly resin does give you a very much more of a different vibe, and something that you would expect to find on a real working crossbow. Now, I don't know if you would still class these as quivers, but she does have her storage of arrows located on the tops of her gloves. Of course, I say the tops of her gloves because her hands are rotated around. Now, there doesn't seem to be arrows on the other side, so I can't help but wonder whether she's already pulled and used all of those, or if it simply is only placed on the one side. Luckily, nothing has been broken, despite for the fact that the tips are so thin and narrow in size. These are being painted very nicely in silver, a nice metallic silver, and as you can see, even despite for the fact that they are as small as they are, DC Collectibles has really done a good job of sculpting the texturing to each of the individual points of those arrows. Truly, there's a lot to stare at with this statue release of DC Covergirls Huntress. She's really a beautiful looking statue, designed once again exquisitely by Joelle Jones and translated by DC Collectibles. Any avid viewers of this channel, dedicated viewers, thank you for that by the way, will know I'm a big fan of Joelle Jones's work. Anytime the DC Collectibles can extract her artwork and put it into a statue rendition, usually those pieces are the ones that I source out first and foremost. I was really anxious to see what Huntress would look like when we physically get her in hand. And physically having her in hand, I have to admit, she is another home run hit from DC Collectibles. It shows some real strong restraint on their part to kind of keep the coloring, the shading, minimal at best on her face and her hair. Huntress, I really didn't think needed additional shading on her face, and her hair certainly didn't need those simple go-tos of the blue highlights. I think that would have taken too much away from the face, and I'm glad to see that DC Collectibles really knew the restraint of keeping as minimal as they possibly could, while really adding that additional shading to her hood, the jacket that she sports, and her pants. Again, the only stumbling point to this, and again, I want to stress the fact that it's really only potentially just my statue, is the fact that the arrow is slightly drooped on this one. You could try to go in and fix it, but again, my biggest risk is the fact that the material is so thin. Bending and trying to put the arrow back in its proper straight place may result in the arrow breaking off, which will then of course require some glue to fix it back up. Again, I really do like this one quite a bit. Perhaps biased for the fact that I am such a big fan of Joelle Jones's work, but I really have to admit that this is a really stunning piece and a stunning release of Huntress here as a poly resin statue. If you guys are interested in picking this one up for yourself, the DC Covergirls Huntress should be now available in comic book stores. Again, a big thank you to the folks over at DC Collectibles for really making this review possible in the first place and allowing me the opportunity to showcase it to you guys, the viewers. If you guys also want to go back and have a look at some of my other DC Collectibles reviews, there's certainly playlists for that. If you're also more in the fancy of statue reviews, well, would you believe there's also a playlist designated for just statues. You can certainly as well, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button down below. You can certainly, most definitely, if you haven't done so already, hit that bell notification. And of course, stay tuned, because there's going to be a whole lot of reviews coming your way. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.